Social justice advocate Lovelene Mendez goes in depth of how most people who are sexually assaulted are assaulted by a close friend of the family or even by a relative. She shares her views on how the cycle begins.
So you have these young men who are generally just innocent, loving men, and who have that boundary cross. And then that boundary cross, they don't know how to deal with it. A lot of times their body rejects themselves and they kind of give into it because, it could be one thing, well, I didn't want to act like or seem like I was homosexual, so I'm not homosexual, so I just kind of let her do it to me. That's still emotional abuse.
Dr. Howard, with Women Organized Against Rape, informs that there are various factors that causes people to commit such heinous crimes. She also lets people know that there are advocates available and assistance for those who have been affected.
It's not one thing. It's it's many things. And so we know that abuse of any kind, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, but primarily for this organization, sexual abuse, it's around misuse of power and control and how you manipulate and influence that issue, that topic of consent. And so it's consent, mishandling of power, it's mishandling of control, it's boundary setting. So it's not just the one thing. It is a culture that supports rape. So we live in a time where rape is supported, and in our movies, in our music, in the way people act and interact with each other, and the fact that the leader of a great nation has said publicly that he grabs women in their genitals and that's okay, and it's not just that statement, it's then saying every athlete talks about that in the same way. And so now you're impacting an entire athletic community, and then the athletic community then has to stand up and say, no, actually, that's not what we talk about in the locker room. Um, but how that was poo pooed. And that sends messages around the culture that we live in, and that rape and violation, the word that you used, is okay in this land, and it's not.
I think if you look into the perspective of the people who spoke to the girls who brought it to light and how they try to minimize their voice, I think that had to be the biggest light bulb that went off in my head, just to see how people minimize it so much. You have these girls talking to you and saying, this is what Harvey Weinstein is doing to me or did to me, and it's doing to several other girls, and people literally just said, well, that's just Harvey. And when you look at it, it's not something to sweep under the rug. Nothing of such, whether it's Bill Cosby, whether it's Nelly, whether it's even somebody like Brock Turner, where it's in just most obvious cases. This isn't something to sweep under the rug. And when you continue to minimize somebody's voice, eventually there's going to be silence. And then eventually this silence will just lead to repetition, in a sense of it's never going to stop. It's going to continue. And that's where we need to put the pause. That's where we need to hit the brakes, and we have to allow people to feel comfortable enough to speak up, to scream on this subject. It's ridiculous how prevalent it is for men with money to take advantage of vulnerable women and boys as well. We don't want to overlook the Jerry Sandusky trials, things as such. There's men and women who are still being attacked, vulnerable men and women who are still being attacked and taken advantage of. And a lot of times the media, the community, people in your own family would like to minimize your own voice and stopping it, whether they're saying you probably looked for it, you should have never put yourself in this position, or what did you do that made him come onto you. The media a lot of times, and just society in general, like to say, oh, what are you wearing as a woman? As if what I'm wearing is going to bring somebody on to me, to sexually assault, to rape me, and things like that. When in reality, there was a study done on prison inmates who are rapists, and they could have said, well, not that they could have said, but they did say, the reason why I attacked her is because she has a ponytail, and it's easier to grab her. Red turns me on. She had red lipstick on that day. she wasn't paying attention. She was unaware of her surroundings. She was an easy target. You know, it wasn't oh, she had a short skirt on, so she must have been asking for it. She was just an easy target because of her hairstyle. What are we going to start telling women to shave their heads? We're going to tell boys to wear baseball caps all the time and not, be themselves. It seems like this societal standard is, well, conform to this way and you won't have to deal with that. Not allow somebody being themselves, being comfortable, and maybe I shouldn't touch somebody. Maybe I shouldn't cross that line. In family, you see how other mothers are always trying to protect women and saying you don't want boys to look at you as this and that. But who are teaching these boys? You shouldn't cross these boundaries with women. You shouldn't touch these young ladies. You shouldn't cross these lines. They don't say these things. They just let them do themselves, do whatever they want, and say, well, boys will be boys.
Women Organized Against Rape is working to counter that argument of boys will be boys. They're teaching young children that no means no, and the concept of personal space.
Sure. We have a variety of ways that we interact with individuals. And so for our younger school age, it's a good touch, bad touch. It's how do you help others keep you safe, and what that all means in the grand scheme of things. We use quite a variety of safer sex or healthy relationship curricula. And so those curricula help guide those classes. And so our classes are always going to be age appropriate. You can teach about consent, which is a challenge at a very young age. It is, when someone says no, and it can be, no, I don't want to share this, no, I don't want you to have this. Those are all educational opportunities, teachable moments about consent. And they broaden to sexual decision making as the child gets older. But at the younger age, it's about sharing and setting boundaries that are age appropriate for them. And then you expand upon it later.
So they're crossing this line, and then it becomes like a regular thing almost, where every time you see this, your mom's friend or your mom's sister, where it's every time she crosses that boundary, now it's a regular thing that you're doing, whether you know it or not. Now it's a regular thing, and it probably disgusts these men, that these women that you're supposed to trust, that are supposed to have that nurture factor in them, are crossing this line, are disrespecting this line and pushing them to that point. So they almost feel like, well, this is normal, this is what happens. So either they do it to other little boys or they do it to other women. And so it's this cycle. Or it can be that they're so, how do I say this? They could be the complete opposite. They're so disgusted, they're so turned back by it. It's so traumatizing to them that either they will go into a place where it's like, I don't want nobody near my kid because this happened to me.
Not understanding what consent means, that it has to be given, that if the only response that's allowable to move forward with any behaviors, yes, that you have to talk about receiving permission, and the importance of communication in relationships, regardless of what the relationships are, and how to navigate that.